Thank you everybody for joining us for this week's Thursday 30. We've got Katie Fitch from Crick Software with us, and Katie is going to give us lots of practical tips for using Clicker support writing in the classroom. If you've got any questions for Katie, can you just type them into the chat and we'll answer them at the end of the session. So thank you, Katie, and over to you.
Oh, thanks, Annabelle. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this Thursday 30 session. So what we're going to be looking at this afternoon is supporting daily writing with Clicker and how you can personalise that for the learners that you work with. So there's going to be three main sections to this afternoon. First of all, perhaps a little bit of a reminder or a refresher, but we'll be looking at some of the key Clicker tools that can be used to support daily writing. Then we'll move on to having a look at how you can adapt some of the ready-made resources for the individual learners that you work with. And finally, we'll have a look at personalising some of Clicker's settings just to suit the different learning profiles, again, of the children that you're working with. And as Annabelle says, if you've got any questions at any time, please pop them in the box for me. So hopefully you can see Clicker on your screen. The idea of Clicker is that we want to make children become more confident and independent writers. And to do this, they have access to a number of support tools to help them in their day-to-day writing. So the first one, and again, many of you might be familiar with this, but the first key support within Clicker is that everything is speech supported. So having typed in a sentence and adding my full stop.
My name is Katie.
Clicker will highlight and read everything back to the learner. Highlighting is really important because it encourages children to read and track along and match the written word with the spoken word. So everything within Clicker is speech supported. You can use any punctuation, whether it's a full stop, an exclamation mark or a question mark, and Clicker will read it back. The next key tool that we have is a word predictor. So useful for children who perhaps write quite slowly, perhaps add in the first couple of letters of the word and then might get stuck. So I'm working on my laptop version. I will show you this in an iPad as well in a minute, just so you're familiar with where all the different tools are. But to access the predictor on your laptop, along to the top ribbon, and if you click the square button, it will start to open up a word box. So if I was to write the sentence, my favourite sport is football, as I add in my letters, Clicker will start to predict for me. Really useful when I'm writing a longer word, such as favourites, because you can see here that by adding one or two letters, Clicker is starting to predict that much longer word. Now, that speech feedback that we've just mentioned is also available within the predictor. So if children do have their predictor on, and perhaps they still want to check the right word is favourites, in the laptop version, just a right click.
Father, family, favourites.
And they can listen to any of the words there. So right click to listen. I've chosen my word favourite now, so I'm going to left click on this to have it sent into my writing page. And you can see that I'm quite quickly moving through this sentence without having to add in an enormous amount of letters. Also useful if you've got children that still spell quite phonetically. I'm going to give football a go here. And as you can see, not only is Clicker predicting words based on my spelling pattern, also predicting words based on the phonetic patterns that I'm using. So even if children aren't spelling entirely accurately, using those phonic sounds, Clicker will still recognise it. And as you'd expect, when I add in my full stop,
my favourite sport is football.
There we go, it reads everything back to me again. It's also got a spell checker. So if you do have children writing sentences and they do make a spelling mistake, I'm going to put one in here for us. You'll get the red squiggly underline, so I can see an error. If I put in the full stop,
I like playing outside.
it's going to read it back to me. I can hear the error now as well as seeing it. So for my spell checker, I'm going to right click on the word, and you can see there that Clicker's going to start suggesting my alternatives in that spell checker box. And exactly the same as in the predictor, if I want to check, I can do a right click and a left click to choose. So speech feedback, word prediction and spell checking are really important tools for those day-to-day writing tasks. We also have the option within Clicker to use a voice note recorder. So this is useful for children who perhaps struggle with working memory or sequencing ideas, or the cognitive load of remembering their thought and then writing it down. So to activate this, just head to the microphone button along the top ribbon, press the red record button. On sunny days, I like to play outside with my friends. I'm going to press stop and done, and that voice note will appear in my page. So learners can have up to a minute's talk time, and they can have up to 6 voice notes sitting in their writing page. So it's a good way of giving children that help with cognitive load and working memory, because Clicker will remember those sentences, key vocabulary words, paragraph ideas, whatever they're recording there within their document. If you're using Clicker on an iPad, just a couple of little differences. You can still access the predictor from the top ribbon. You can still activate the voice note recorder from the top button. The only difference will be if you're using your spell checker and your predictor, it will sit above your keyboard. If you want to listen to any of the words in the spell checker or predictor, rather than doing the right click and left click as we would within a laptop, we've got a blue sound shift button sitting here above the grid. If I tap that and tap the word,
The
Clicker will then read it aloud to me. So the only key difference is the predictor and spell checker sitting above the onboard keyboard, the option to listen through the blue sound shift button. So those key writing tools, as I mentioned, really important for that day-to-day writing engagement and build-up of written outcome. It might also be that not only do we have those tools that might be supporting our learners, we might have some of the ready-made Clicker grids. So these are great for providing scaffold to learners at different levels and stages of the writing journey. And to find these, I'm going to head into the folder icon in the top left of Clicker, and I'm going to go to the area that says Learning Grids Resources. So this is where you'll find our bank of ready-made cross-curriculum, instantly accessible resources. So whatever topic it is that you're planning to support your writers with today, you will find in those curriculum categories. Today I'm going to look at an English theme, and we're going to look at some creative writing, specifically some writing around fantasy creatures, and just think about how I can potentially adapt some of these to support the different learners that I might be working with. The first grid that we have is called a sentence set. Now, these are ideal for providing step-by-step sentence construction activities. It gives you everything that you need on your grid at the bottom of your page to create a sentence linked to your writing on fantasy creatures. It's got a picture prompt as well to give you a little bit of visual support. And as we know, everything within that grid can be read aloud. On a laptop, I right click.
dragon,
On an iPad, I click the blue button and I tap.
fire,
So when I'm ready to make that sentence, I can tap my word and it starts to appear in my writing page. So a self-guided, step-by-step sentence creation activity with point and click vocabulary that I can have read aloud. Within a sentence set, you also have additional support. So above the picture icon, you will find a model. This model, when you select it, will show you the sentence that you're trying to make. Now, I could read that, or I could click to listen.
a dragon breathes fire,
But with the model open, I can't select the words. So it's really useful for developing working memory, almost a bit like a look, say, cover, write, check model there on the screen. So now when I hide the model, I can go back to my sentence and continue building that up. And I can return to the model as many times as I want to before I've made my sentence. I add in my full stop and you know what's going to happen.
a dragon breathes fire,
Clicker will read everything back to me. And I can simply move on to the next grid and the next grid, individually building up each of those sentences. A sentence set could develop into what we call a connect set. So this time we're keeping our topic of fantasy creatures, but a connect set is giving children a little bit more working vocabulary, and it's giving them choices now. Beginnings, middles, ends, words to connect and extend sentences with. So it's still providing a scaffold where I can have the words read aloud to me, but it's starting to introduce an element of choice. What comes first? What could come next? Would I extend my sentence? Would I finish it with a full stop? And again, I've got a number of grids that I can work through that give me those vocabulary options with a slightly wider choice of language that I'm able to choose from. And finally, the last writing grid that I might have access to is what we call a word bank. So these would be designed to be used with children who know their high frequency words and generally remember their full stops to frame their sentences, but would really benefit from some topic specific vocabulary. So again, building up our piece of writing about our fantasy creature, we would have these vocabulary tabs at the bottom of our page that might be really useful as I build up my selection. Children can also, as well as having a word bank at the bottom of the page, also have access to their word predictor. So they can use those two different supports in combination with each other. So if they still need some support with high frequency words, or if you just want to keep up the speed and the flow of that writing outcome, it might be beneficial to have the predictor turned on, as well as the words at the bottom that can then be used to supplement the words that I'm typing and adding in through my predictor. So a sentence set, a connect set, and a word bank are ideal ways of scaffolding that writing support for children around the topic that we're learning about. Those grids can also be edited, and there's a number of changes that you can make to them. So if I jump back to my sentence set, I might decide potentially that I want to change the model that children are working with. So I'm going to go into the edit option down in the bottom corner, and I might be looking at my model and my word order. So potentially I might want to put my words into sentence order. At the moment, they're in random order. Let's select sentence order. And I might want to change my model, which at the moment is a view and remember. Let's have a look at view and copy. So if I press go now, you'll be able to see that the words are now appearing in sentence order, and my model is now pinned to the top of my writing grid. So rather than having to select the model as a pop-up, it's going to sit there for me so my learner can match word to word in sentence order to build up that sentence sequence through those word selections. So the edit option will always allow me in a sentence set to change the model and to change the sentence order. It also allows me to change any of the text in the sentence box at the top. This sentence is reading, a goblin is small and greedy. Let's change the word greedy really quickly to green. So all I've had to do is change the text in the sentence box. If I press go, you'll see that it's now made that slight change into the grid at the bottom. You might potentially be working with learners who perhaps use colourful semantics or a colour coding system with the vocabulary that they're working with. So if I was to jump into my Connect set and want to make some changes to this option, again, I'd go to my edit option, and what I want to do this time is change the colours of certain groups of words. So if I click the cluster of words that I want to have changed, I can change a whole cluster. Here's my colour palette along the top of the grid. Let's make these all purple. If I want to change an individual word, I'd click on the individual cell, I'd choose my colour, and I would change that individual word cell. So a cluster of words by selecting all of them, an individual word by clicking on the cell itself, and then choosing the colour palette. And now when I press go, you can see I've added in those colours into that ready-made grid. And finally, and just announced last week, is the ability to add widget symbols into any of the clicker grids. If you've got learners that benefit from visual prompts and perhaps specifically widget symbols, Clicker now includes access to a bank of 10,000 widget symbols that you can then add into the grids at the click of a button. So again, we go to our edit function, and this time we're going to select the picture icon along the top of the grids. I'm going to choose the option that says Picturize. And the first thing I'm going to do is decide if I want pictures in my high frequency words or not. I'm going to choose to have them in my high frequency words. If you don't want them there, you simply tick the box. But I am going to apply these symbols to all of the different grids. And on the next tab, I'm going to choose my widget symbols box. I'm going to picturize. And what you'll then see Clicker doing is it will instantly add your widget symbols into all of the grids where we have symbols available for you to use. So all of those can go in there instantly with the picturize feature and the widget symbol library there selected. I will say, if this has only been released last week, so if you do try to picturize any of the grids and you don't see the widget symbol library appearing, you probably need to update to the latest version of Clicker. So if for any reason the widget bank doesn't appear, you do need to do an update on the device that you're working with. I'll quickly show you that on an iPad. It's not hugely different. What I would do is find my grid. So here's the grid that we're going to use. My edit button within Clicker Writer would be down in the bottom right. Again, you would have the same selections. So in our sentence set, our option to change model and order, option to change the colour of the cell with the colour palette, or the option to picturise with the picture icon, picturise with widget symbols, choose if we want to ignore the high frequency words. We're going to do it in every grid. Let's press picturise. And what you then see is all of those added into the grids for you there at the bottom of the page. So lots of adaptations that you can make to any of those ready-made grids, from the text to the colour to the models to the images that you can build into them. So all additional levels of scaffold. Finally then, let's think about some of the options that we have for really personalising Clicker for some of the individual needs of the learners that we're working with. So within Clicker on your laptop, the Options tab is going to let you explore lots of the different personalisations. So option number 1 might be that children want to listen to a different voice. So there is a drop-down menu there with different voice selections that you can choose from. You might also want to speed up and slow down the speed at which the voice is reading back to you. So you'd find that all on the Speech tab. You might also want to change the display that children are working with. So that might include the colour of their writing page, if they don't particularly like the white background. It might also include the colour of the font that they're working with. You'll find all of that on the Colours tab. If you want to change the font, or if you want to change the size of the font, that will be in the next tab along, the Fonts option. So again, you're finding this within your Options tab. You might also want to have pictures or symbols working within your writing document. So this is in the Pictures tab, and I'm going into my Picturise option, and I might select the option that says words as I type into the document. And what this now does is it will start to add pictures as I write. Let's choose our high frequency words, or else it's not going to work with those. Here we go. So what's happening now is as I type into my document, you can see that I'm adding those instant widget symbols in there as I type. So if you like that as a level of support, that's in the Options, Pictures, Picturise, words as I type into the document. You might also want to have those symbols appearing in the word predictor and in the spell checker. So if you want those options, select your predictor, select your spell checker, and you can have symbols appearing in there as well. And the final one that I'm going to talk about in terms of the options menu is the access option. If you're working with children that use eye gaze, single switch or two switch, you can go into the menu here to set up their specific settings for their access method. There's also the option to use super keys. So if you want an enlarged keyboard where the letters or the grid cells are clustered together, you can turn on super keys, which then clusters these selections into larger working options for children to select. So by clicking on this one, it will give me an expanded menu. Useful again for some children with accessibility issues, perhaps children that are still not entirely accurate using a point and click mouse, or just need a larger area that we can select from. So that's where you'll find those options in the laptop version. Just quickly, before I see if there's any questions, if you're working on an iPad, your options menu will be in the cog button. So here are your menu selections. So changing the font, you'll find on the General tab, along with the colour and the background. If you want to change the speech options, you'll find them on the Next tab along. If you want to set up your accessibility options, that will be in this button here. So again, switch access and super keys will be in the accessibility tab just here. So hopefully today I've shown you some of the ways that you can use the key tools to support writing, some of the ready-made writing grids and how we can adapt them, and finally the options to really personalise Clicker to some of the learners that you're working with. I will finally, before I look at the questions option, also show you our tutorials on our webinar. If you want to create any of your own resources to actually make some of those clicker grids from new, I would suggest going into our Learning Hub, heading over to the tutorials, selecting the type of device that you're working with, and moving through these short tutorials. So if you want to create and make a sentence set, a connect set, or a word bank, there's a short tutorial there that will guide you through that process. There's also an interesting tutorial looking at the different accessibility settings, how you can tailor the features, and also finally saving, sharing and printing. Because if you are creating these resources on a teacher device and you want to then share it to a learner's device, there's some really helpful hints and tips around how you can do that in the saving, sharing and printing tutorial. So I'm just going to pause there and I'm just going to glance over to my other screen and see if anybody's got any questions in the chat box
There
or
is a
anything.
question there,
Oh, there is a
Katie.
question.
Yeah.
Let's have a
And
look.
Jana's just asking, are there any plans to include phonics in options speech letters? And Jana, if you're there, do you want to come off mute? And although I'm not sure whether she can actually come off mute. Does that make sense, Katie?
I think potentially what she's
there you are.
asked, there you are. I think the question might sort of be involved in at what point Clicker reads back. I might, if I'm getting this wrong, then please interrupt me. But in the speech option, you can choose if Clicker speaks sentences, words, or letters. Most commonly, we'd say that schools use sentences. Sometimes you might want the speech feedback at the end of every word. You can have each letter sound read aloud to you as well if you want. I would say that is used much less commonly.
Yeah, I've had requests from some of the teachers if it could be set to letters, but then it speaks letters rather than phonics, and they wanted to find out if phonics could be spoken.
Okay.
That's why I was asking Any
That's
plans for that?
Okay, so not that I know of at the moment, but as always, I'll feed it back to the development team so they can put it in their next meeting to have a discussion around. So really good feedback, and I've made a note of it.
Thank you.
Maureen had her hand up. I don't know. Are you still there? Yep, yeah, there she is.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, when you use the voice notes,
Yes.
if you've made, say, 3 voice notes,
Yes.
and then the children have written 3 sentences to go with those voice notes, and
Yes.
then you want to add more voice notes after that, is there a
Yes.
way of getting the second set of voice notes to appear below the writing? Because at the moment, they just kind of carry on underneath the previous voice notes.
Yes, so not currently, Maureen. So what you want is you want almost the voice note to appear in line with the text.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I think that might be something that the team are looking at, but again, I'll pass it back so that it's back there in the mix.
Fabulous, thank you.
Laura, I think has Laura got a question?
I think I'm not sure if Laura's just kind of dropped out and come back into the meeting again. But anyway, does anybody else have any questions for Katie? Otherwise, we might leave it there. It's really interesting that you've got the widget, the 10,000 widget symbols being added. That's going to be really handy, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's a really nice collaboration with Widget. And as I say, that's just been announced last week. So it should be there in your Clicker desktop version and your Clicker writer version now.
And Laura just said yes. Sorry, she dropped out and she's dropped in again. But yeah. So does anybody else have any other questions, or we might leave it there? I think it's all gone quiet, Katie, but that was really interesting. And I'm sure it will be really handy to everybody who's out and about in the classrooms.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Katie.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.